97 Ford Thunderbird with 3.8 V6. And just my luck, it's got more problems than just the water pump and the thermostat, causing it to overheat. When I tested the water pump and the thermostat, filled the coolant up, and I turned the engine on and took it for a test drive, to my disappointment, it still starts to overheat after 30 minutes of driving because this electric fan decides not to turn on. And there's two ways this electric fan is supposed to turn on. It's supposed to turn on anytime you have the air conditioning on. So whenever you turn on the AC, the electric fan is supposed to turn on. Well, it didn't. So that's one problem. And there's also a switch that controls the electric fan to turn on at 210 degrees. And there's a coolant temp sensor. And I believe that's the cooling fan temp sensor. So when that sensor senses 210 degrees, it's supposed to turn on this electric fan right there. Then there's another probable cause that can cause the electric fan to not turn on, is this little computer right here in front of the intake. In front of the air cleaner, there's a little computer that hooks to the main computer and decides when this electric fan is going to turn on. So if you own a 1997 Thunderbird or a Mustang, it has this irritating problem potential. So I'm going to have to troubleshoot why this electric fan is not coming on. The connection is connected, and it could also be a possibility that this electric fan, which is only 2 years old, could have failed. So it's either the fan sensor, or the fan computer, or possibly a fuse related to such. So I will be testing this in the next few days, probably tomorrow. I'll continue to work on it, but I've got other cars I have to fix too. There's a 1991 Ford F-250 that has a clutch problem where the clutch pedal sinks to the floor. And that tells me that it's related to the clutch master and slave cylinder. Of course, the owner thinks it's just a clutch, but, you know, most people think, it's the clutch. Well, the clutch, you have to take off the transmission to change. But there's also the clutch master cylinder and slave cylinder. The master cylinder is hooked up to the clutch pedal, and it has a line that goes all the way down to the transmission shifting forks, and that's what controls when you push your clutch pedal down. It pushes the shifting forks and pushes the pilot bearing, well, not the pilot bearing, the clutch bearing to push the clutch in to disengage and engage. So that'll be some more videos for tomorrow. I'll be working on an F-250, trying to figure out why the clutch pedal doesn't engage the clutch to put into gear. And it also doesn't start when you push the clutch in, which is another problem. So that's what sucks about these newer cars. Anything from like the late 80s to today, there's just so many computers that control so many things that things are not simple. When you have an overheating problem, it's usually a water pump and a thermostat, or a radiator, or a cooling fan. But with these newer cars, there's always more. There's a sensor, a fan that may or may not be broken, a computer that controls the fan, and various fuses that will either give power to it or not. So yes, that's the update to the 97 Thunderbird. It's going to take more troubleshooting to figure out why it overheats. Well, we know why it overheats, because the cooling fan doesn't come on. But while you're driving, the temperature stays consistent, which tells me the water pump and the thermostat are now doing what they're supposed to do and opening at operating temperature. However, when you slow down or stop, temperature rises because the electric fan does not come on. So Yeah, sometimes I miss older cars where things were simple. But these newer cars, they have lots of different sensors, separate computers to turn fans on and off at certain times when the air conditioning turns on or when the temperature reaches 210 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you ever have a Thunderbird or a Mustang with a 3.8 engine and you have this problem, those are the components that usually cause the overheating problem. Water pump, radiator, thermostat, electric fan's computer, and the temperature control switch. Or an air pocket in the engine where the coolant goes from the radiator to the engine, goes through the heater core, comes out, and then goes out of the water pump into the radiator, and the process just continues. And the thermostat opens at 180 degrees. So once 180 degrees happens, coolant recycles from the radiator back to the engine, through the heater core, through the entire engine, then out of the water pump again, then back to the radiator, and it recycles to keep the coolant cool because the engine keeps heating it up. So whenever you have an overheating condition, either the thermostat's not opening, the water pump's not performing right, the radiator could be clogged, the electric fan could not be coming on or not turning on. So there are or the radiator could be clogged because after so many years, the radiators get clogged with deposits. Well, this radiator's 2 years old, so I know it's not that. The radiator fan's 2 years old, which electric components can fail whenever they want. So a year, 2 years, anytime an electronic component can fail. So that's a probable cause. Or this little sensor, and I'm hoping it's not this computer here which controls the radiator fan by communicating with the computer when the coolant temp sensor senses that it needs to be turned on. So there's a lot of communication going on with these fuel-injected engines after the late 80s. So this is a little conversation I figured I'd let everybody know about, because when you're troubleshooting overheating conditions, it's never just one thing. It's maybe one or two or three things. And those are the possibilities it can be. Or a coolant leak. If you have a coolant leak, that can also cause an overheating condition because when the coolant leaks out, air replaces it. And when there's not enough coolant in the engine from the leak, the little bit of coolant that you have left turns to steam, and then you start getting overflow bottles steaming and blowing out coolant and all that stuff. Because air pockets in the cooling system is not a good thing. It causes overheating. So that's about all I have to say about this car today. There's going to be more troubleshooting in the future. Most likely I'm going to troubleshoot it more tomorrow. I've kind of had it with this car today. It hasn't been very friendly. It's just, usually when you have an overheating condition, the overheating condition on that car was at first a leak, and the leak caused the coolant to leak out. So we changed the thermostat and the water pump because it was leaking. Put all those new parts in, the leak stopped, but then the overheating condition happened when you go to a stop and just sit there at idle. Like I had it parked and I sat at idle and I just watched the cooling temperature go up, and I looked at 210 degrees, the coolant. So that's the next problem. So water pump, no problem. Thermostat, no problem. There's no air in the lines because there's no leaks. I bled it. I opened that little part right there when I filled it up. When I filled the coolant up, I had this little part off, and that takes the air out of the system. You put it back on. start the vehicle, take it for a little drive once the coolant's all topped off, and have the heater core open, basically the heat on the open position. And that makes sure that all the air gets out of the heater core, all the lines. And I did that a few times, re-topped it off when it cooled down, and I still have an overheating condition when it sits there and idles because the coolant fan doesn't come on. So there's some things for you, just in case you guys have a complicated cooling system overheating problem. There's always more than one or two probable causes. If you're unlucky, there's usually more. But those are the things that usually cause coolant temp over temp or overheating conditions. So water pump, thermostat, radiator, cooling fan, coolant temperature switch. There's lots of little things there. And of course, the cooling fan computer, which is unique to some of these Fords. Now, a lot of the newer ones, I believe, do not have a separate cooling computer. It's taken care of by the engine's PCM, or powertrain control module. So a lot of the newer ones in the mid-2000s and newer, they don't have separate computers for the cooling system. So that's a good thing, because the more computers, the more money you got to spend when they fail. But 97, I guess, was one of those years when they had to have a separate computer for the cooling system, a separate computer for the engine management system, and that just makes everything harder to troubleshoot when you have problems with over temp or overheating conditions on the engine. So we're gonna walk away from this Thunderbird today. I know where I'm at. Got to troubleshoot whether it's the coolant temp switch, the computer, or the electric fan itself. See which of the three has failed. So, close this video off. We'll take a little walk around. Say hi to Turbo Buick right there. That's the 1980 Turbo Buick. Say hi to the 1986 Ford F-150. This particular vehicle, I'm got it on the back burner right now, but eventually it's going to be finished. And this used to have a straight six in it, but now it has a twin turbo 347 cubic inch V8, which I got to continue working on it one of these days. I've got the engine attached to the transmission. Have to do a little fabrication on the motor mounts. Got to install the alternator with this little kit that I bought. Alternator, power steering pump, along with the other accessories, get them all hooked up. Put the distributor in, because that's just a distributor to block the holes. Just a one I use to keep the dust out of the distributor hole down there. I've got a nice distributor for it. Install the radiator, the intercooler, things like that. And I have to change the oil pan too, because I found an issue with the other oil pan. So I have to put a new oil pan on it. And I got to run the turbo return lines, the oil return lines. I got to route them to an oil cooler line, and it'll go in an oil cooler and out to cool the oil after it goes through the turbocharger before returning to that little block right there. And I have a remote oil cooler relocation. So the oil cooler is going to go somewhere else. The oil filter is going to be relocated somewhere else. But little by little, this Ford F-150 twin turbo sleeper's coming along. It's just I haven't touched it for a while because I've been busy with other cars. Got the 1986 Nissan 300ZX Turbo. Got the new turbocharger installed. But just my luck, I go to start the car and there's no spark. So I put a new distributor in, still no spark. So I've got to troubleshoot that and find out why it doesn't spark. Like I said, I got great luck. Not. And I got the 87 Buick here. It does run. It runs and drives okay, but it needs a little bit more work done to it. Because it runs great until you floor it. And when you floor it, it has a hesitation when you reach boost levels higher than 15 pounds. But she's sure a nice car. Let's turn it on just for fun. All right, well, just a video to update you on some things, and we fired up the Turbo Buick just for fun. I like to end things on a good note, and that Buick Turbo T is pretty cool. Look at another engine I got in the garage. This is a 5.4 overhead cam Ford V8, 2 valves per cylinder. And look at that nice supercharger on top of there. They put that on the factory Ford SVT Lightning and the Harley-Davidson version of the F-150 from around 99 to 2003. And this engine came from an SVT Lightning from 2003. Same engine as the Harley-Davidson. And the idea for this engine, the reason I got it is I would like to stick it in one of my Ford Expeditions that has four-wheel drive, so all that power will get to the wheels. Because with the Lightning and the Harley-Davidson, they just spin and spin and spin because they're just rear-wheel drive trucks. But putting a supercharged 5.4 in an Expedition with four-wheel drive, well, that can make something fun. And here we got the original Buick Turbo T engine, 1987 Turbo T Limited original engine sitting on a stand. I put some nicer valve covers on it. Yep. And this engine on the stand is that 1997 Ford Thunderbird. That's the original engine that came out of the car. I put a Mustang 3.8 in it a couple years ago. And let's see. Got some nice wheels and tires that fit a 5x114 lug spacing pattern, and they're 19x9s. And they got some nice snow tires on it. They fit Nissans and some Toyotas that have a 5-lug pattern, like the RAV4, the 300ZX. If you have enough room for those tires, then you fit the Nissan GTR. They'll fit some of those Infinity 5-lug wheels. Yeah, they're good-looking wheels. They're the T37 style. There's a transmission from a 1979 Nissan 280ZX. There's the modified hood for the 1979 280ZX, which is going to get this Ford 302 from a 1995 Ford Mustang GT. It comes with a Tremec 5-speed. That's what's going to get transplanted in the 1979 Nissan 280ZX. And you know me, I'm going to throw turbos on it. It's just one project at a time. Got so many of them. Eventually I'll get them all done, or I'll die trying. We'll see what happens first. I'm in the mid-50s, so we'll see how long I live and see how many projects get done before I drop. Okay, look at all these factory intakes right here. All these factory intakes that I've removed from trucks over the years and cars because I don't like factory intakes. They're too restrictive. They only breathe out of a tiny little trumpet like that. All that air is all you get for the V8 with a factory intake. So I call these intakes just like breathing out of a straw when you're running down the street. Then there's this engine right here. This is the original engine from a 1970 Datsun 240Z from 1970. That's the L24 engine, single overhead cam. It originally had 2 Hitachi SU side draft carburetors. And I'm probably not going to do anything with this engine, so if anybody needs a 1970 original 240Z straight 6 engine, I've got one sitting here. If somebody wants to make their Z original with the L24, there it is. And this engine on a stand is a Toyota 2.5 4-cylinder that went out of a Toyota truck. I basically rebuilt the short block on it. Got a new head on it. It's just something, I don't have anything to put it in, so it's just been sitting on my engine stand. Yeah, so many projects. Yep. 86 300ZX turbo. Recently got a 3582 GT turbo that I put on it. You can see some of the other videos that show the progression on that. That turbo barely fit. See how tight it is down there? Yep. Back when they did T-tops, 1986 300ZX turbo, they did nice little T-tops. They don't seem to do that anymore on cars. I wish they bring that back. That's enough for today. I've kind of gone over quite a bit. Talked everybody's ear off a bit about different vehicles. Hope everybody has a great Sunday and take care and mad boosting.